Hey guys, the name of today's session is Courage. And here, this is based on the chapter with the same name of the book that I'm working on. And we will look at man's ability to be a warrior for good, man's ability to show courage. And I love the word courage because it comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. So basically, by definition, courage is the ability to be. Let's start again. By definition, courage is the ability, I think, to be able to draw upon your own heart, which is very interesting that the word heart will be contained in courage, because it shows you that since we all have a heart, inner being, all men bear that same image, courage. All men have courage. And if you don't believe me, look at the games that little boys play. Look at the books they like and the stories they like, and if you look at my own story, even though in school I was just a nice boy, I never defended or protected anyone. I couldn't protect myself even, and I didn't want to, because any confrontation, verbal or in any form, for me was scary. But that's because I was not able to draw upon that courage. That area was shut down because of my father. Even me, I remember being really drawn to those superheroes. One of them was Zorro. I remember it came out in 1991. I was so little, but I think by the mid 90s, I was watching this TV series, the new Zorro, and I just loved this man. I was so fascinated by him. Not only was he gentle and gracious, and even the way he moved with grace. He was able to express every emotion, including anger, in a beautiful way, not in an ugly way. He wasn't just a fighter. He wasn't just a killer. He couldn't just kill you. He was a warrior for good. His anger, his ferocity, his fierceness against tyranny served the weak ones, the oppressed ones. And this is what really attracts boys and men. Another one I remember was Vasil Levski. He's one of our national heroes during Ottoman times, and he fought the Ottomans. He led the underground revolutionary committee, but he didn't. You can see that he was not a murderer again. He was not just a soldier. There was nothing scary about this man. He was a gentleman, actually. He was very gentle, and yet he was fierce. And what drove him was love for his people, not hatred against the oppressors. He actually said, "I'm dreaming of a republic where Muslims, Christians, and Jewish people will live together." He never excluded anyone. He just excluded tyranny. He hated tyranny. And this is what is so attractive, because there's no darkness in that. Warrior on the side of good. Liberator. And you, if you're watching this video, if you're a man or a woman, but now we're talking about men, because in men that's so much more pronounced. You've got that. And me saying that this courage sort of thing is more pronounced doesn't mean to put women down. It means that the warrior spirit is much more, it's supposed to be much more developed. Because look at it, if you upset a woman, if you keep pushing her, she might slap you, she might beat you up. But if you keep pushing a man, maybe for years, it might take years to arouse that, he might kill you. That's why we end up in prison so much more often. Because this thing is just, you can't take it anymore. We have responsibility to master that, or it will master us, either in depression or in anger, destroying people. In both ways, you're destroying those around yourself. You're destroying your family by withholding your presence, your fierceness, your strength, your being alive. And if you're angry, man, yeah, it's clear for everyone to see. So since every boy has that seed of unique individual masculine courage and heroism within himself, why is that not manifest in the world today? Why has it always been so rare to see a courageous man? Not an angry man, not a violent man, but someone who gets angry at the right things and can master his anger, manage his anger, and channel it to serve a good cause. The man who stopped slavery. Everyone who's ever participated in any sort of revolution for good, not out of selfish motives. This is everyone that's ever stood up against evil or injustice. Not even in wartime only, in peacetime. There's so many battles to be fought today. There's so many things to stand up for and against. Yes, we've got it, but it's so rare. Well, something happens to us as we grow up. And I can look back in my own life, and I used to love Zorro, I used to love Vasilevsky, I used to love another male archetype hero. There was a Italian TV series about the mafia called La Piovra, which means octopus in Italian. And the man's name was Corrado Catani. And I remember the day he died. He just was beautiful. I kept drawing picture after picture of his death. And I must have been only 8 or 9. But I was drawn by this man who didn't compromise with his values. He didn't compromise. And he was like Levski, like Zorro. He was beautiful. That beauty on the inside. A man fully mastering his fierceness. Himself. His core courage, core heart. This is what I was drawn to. So what happened to me? Why didn't I grow up to be that sort of person? Why did I become ugly instead? Why did I hide? Why did I become dark? And why did I have fantasies of all sorts of dark things? And yet on the outside, I was a good boy. I was a bookish sort of guy. Beware. Most of the many mass murderers are exactly that type. People who have been cornered, pushed into a corner by the world, and one day they'll make the world pay. Most of us, we never kill hundreds of people, but we destroy the environment around ourselves by withholding our presence or by outbursts of anger. They might be rare, but they're deadly. Not physically deadly always. They kill relationships. They kill joy. So what happens to us as we grow up? Why do we lose it? Why there's an attack against each one of us? Well, I think, you can't simplify that, but I've tried to work it out in my book as I wrote. And I think men generally fall into one of these 3 categories. But since things are not black and white, I believe we belong, a little bit of us belong in each one of them. The first one is the nice man category. And I got this with me here because I want to read you from the book. There's no point of me just rambling on and on, since I've written this already. Now, what happens to us with that raw courage, then going into these categories? Well, Ernest Hemingway put that very well. He said this: if people bring so much courage to this world, the world has to kill them to break them. And I add, there is much courage in the heart of every baby boy brought into the world, much courage and much strength. But it must be drawn out, nurtured and trained, or it remains weak and hidden, or it will be stifled, darkened and broken. The world breaks everyone, continues Hemingway, whose own masculinity courage was broken. And afterwards, many are strong in the broken places. And see, this is what I want for you. This is what I want for myself. Your history, your scars, they won't go away. But the wounds under them can be healed. And you can be strong in the broken places. And I believe I'm becoming strong in the broken places. That's how I'm able to now stand before you and talk about these things. Because I've walked through these wounds. And those places that were once source of shame and brokenness and I'm not a real man and all, now they bring life to other people. And this is what I want for each one of us. That's how this world will change. When men start to walk this deeper journey within themselves. And now we go into the 3 categories. 3 main categories. The first one I named men without chest, which is what C.S. Lewis once called them, us. And I've written, as we already know by now, men who early in their development have discovered that they do not possess courage and an ability to be fierce, take risks and stand up for what is good and true, they tend to develop a shy, withdrawn and introverted personality. Their achievement in other fields like academics, for example, provide a cover for them. A solid wall behind which their real self can hide, and so long as that wall remains solid, they feel safe. The fierce man, the warrior within them, is undeveloped, frightened and shamed beyond recognition. Indeed, he seems almost non-existent, that is, apart from the rare occasions when their pent-up anger is unleashed against their mothers or when they are older against their wives and children. These angry outbursts often feel deeply shameful to the already shame-bound boy, and in his mind they affirm the belief fueled by the fatherhood that he is not a strong and courageous boy, but simply a petty domestic weakling. Such boys and men are doomed to a life of unspeakable misery. Self-hatred fills their bitter souls, and as a result their bodies begin to shut down and malfunction in a way of responding to the toxic, self-destructive beliefs of their inner self. They often lack a spring in their step and might struggle to keep a free, open-faced connection with those around them. They might find it difficult to maintain eye contact for a long time, that was me, or they might allow others to dominate them in disputes or in the making of decisions. Their self-hatred, fed and nurtured from very early childhood, breeds hatred towards others. But since there is much fear in them, this is rarely expressed, at least in public. But it's there and it's deadly. A number of fears rule such men. Fear of rejection, fear of men and women or both. Fear of aggression and conflict, fear of failure and of public exposure. And they're never at ease within themselves. These boys grow up not knowing that they're indeed courageous, that they're warriors within. Having never been initiated and develop a stronger, sharper and more mature version of themselves, they shrink back in fear and withdraw from anything dangerous or risky. In a subconscious way, they present themselves as simply being polite or quiet men. Unable to draw upon the inner strength, the courage that would make them feel secure and free to live outwardly rather than constantly worrying about themselves, they cannot confront their colleagues, friends and wives in a healthy way. Thus, they deprive them from the blessing of their genuine, truth-loving, life-giving self. The self that is revealed instead is the self of the nice man. This man never confronts or offends anyone and is liked by everybody. He is also false, and behind his facade there is fear and anger. So basically, weak men. Number one. This was me. Maybe 80% of my personality was that. Maybe 70. The second one is ruthless men, or bullies. There are many men whose inner courage has, in one way or another, managed to escape being smothered and suppressed in childhood. Yet, it is often the case that other afflictions plague them. Even though their inner strength might have been developed to some degree, and they might have been made to feel secure in their confidence among other boys, in the ability to speak up and fight when needed, many of them have suffered abuse, violence, or abandonment at the hands of adults, the latter being perhaps the most common of them all. The adult life of a man like that is different than the life of the man described above. Since he does not lack the solid foundation of masculine involvement and input, unlike the nice man, he feels strong. The abandonment of the violence he has once suffered, the abandonment or the violence he has once suffered, serve as fuel to his anger, and he quickly learns how to use it as a means of defending himself and later of getting what he wants from life. Thus, the aggressive man is born. His aggression does not always manifest in violence, but it serves as the engine behind his drivenness and his forceful, often intimidating personality. More often than not, the aggressive man is achievement-oriented. He rarely displays humility and is often prone to disregarding the opinions of others. In many extreme cases, when many of the unseen conditions come together in a dark way, he might become a gang leader or even a political dictator. Unlike the nice man, whose anger is repressed and hidden even from himself, the aggressive man does not need to hide. He leads from the front and he is ruthless. His wife and children obey him, and so do all the people who are in some way close to him or dependent on him. The little boy inside of an aggressive man needs love and affection like all children. Perhaps he has once been wronged, and having made a subconscious vow to never let that happen again, he has grown up holding the shield of fierce independence in one hand and the sword of anger and violence in the other. Constantly protecting himself from others, he cannot receive true love, and with his angry outbursts, he wounds the souls of his loved ones in the very way he had once been wounded. Finally, the aggressive man knows that, just like the coward, he is weak inside and does not possess true strength. Because of this knowledge, he has no peace and needs to keep his anger always close by, like a snake or a scorpion that is ever poised to strike. This is perhaps the most obvious case of aggression that is corrupted and debased. But things are not always so simple in life, and since the human personality is so complex, there are other ways in which the natural, good and life-preserving fierceness of a male child can be misdirected and confused. The third option is macho men. That's a very interesting one. That's the group of people that are actually, they have not become that corrupted as the aggressive men, that bad, but the warrior spirit in them has a lot to prove and they're immature. In many areas, they might be mature fathers and husbands, even in their 50s and 60s. And yet, when they have a few drinks, they might want to beat you or compete with you in some way. So let me read you what I've written about this. There are many men who are perfectly normal, or at least well developed. I said that. Those who know such men cannot make up their mind about them, for they are neither bullies nor cowards, and indeed, when there is no heavy provocation or substance abuse, they seem to have the perfect masculine balance. They may also be odd in terms of their behavior towards their own selves. They might push themselves too hard or live recklessly, taking unnecessary risks. They might enter conflicts that would have otherwise been easily avoided, or be the first to defend someone who might not benefit from their involvement as much as they wish. Some of these men, long past their adolescent years, can be seen every night in bars and pubs, arm wrestling with strangers, and perhaps in a more advanced stage of drinking, even looking for a fight. How are they afflicted? What is this that makes them what they are? While studying the backgrounds of such people, I discovered that many of them have indeed had a healthy and even intimate relationship with their fathers. However, one thing is often missing: their affirmation as warriors, as courageous men. Often, as in the case of President Theodore Roosevelt, whose father was very involved with him but showed utter disappointment in his young son and his young son's sickliness. Such men have to constantly earn their father's affirmation, as a soldier earns his medals on the battlefield. In other instances, the father might have loved them unconditionally but has left the family due to death or divorce just when the son's inner warrior need most input. Right, okay, I'm gonna stop reading now. I mentioned Theodore Roosevelt, who in many ways I think was a great man. He achieved so much. And there's another notable example, Ernest Hemingway. Now let's start with Roosevelt. Roosevelt's father was close to him and he brought him up in an outdoor way of life. But I remember reading a quote. He said, "Theodore, you've got the mind, but you haven't got the body." Instead of him saying, actually, let me help you build up your body, he actually said, "No, you haven't got it." And Theodore, because he was close to his father, he already had some bonding and strength from him, which was great, said, "I'm going to make my body. See, I will drive myself to please you, Dad." I think that's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But at least that's how I see it. And you see, in many ways, he succeeded and he pushed himself, but his family, I believe, in some ways, maybe subconsciously, pretty much sure that is subconsciously, was made to pay for that. Because I remember reading another quote from Theodore Roosevelt this time. In regard to his children, he said, "I would rather see them die than grow up as weaklings." What? Wow, where did that come from? You would rather see your children die than grow up as weaklings? Wow, you see? Love others as you love yourself. The way he loved himself, as dictated by his father, he was able to pass on to his children. And you see how hard he was pushing himself in any way, physically especially. I mean, he was into the boxing and all the martial art thing. And I love all that. I think men should stay sharp physically. But come on, you're the president of the United States, the most powerful man on earth, and you're still fighting with soldiers, with the guard soldiers in the White House. And you know why he stopped boxing when he was 50? Because he lost the eyesight in his left or right eye, one of his eyes. He was punched by one of these soldiers, sparring session. He lost the eyesight. What a pity, what a shame, what a loss. And for what? What do you need to prove? A lot, apparently. Driven men. Good men, but driven. No mercy for themselves. And therefore, no mercy for others in this area. Ernest Hemingway, same. His father was close to him. His father brought him up into the outdoor world. Fishing, hunting, boxing, I think, came from him as well. But every time when Hemingway failed, his father was not pleased with him. You shouldn't fail. So, since the boy was not free to fail, he said, "Okay, I'm going to make sure I never fail. I'm going to always go the extra mile when it comes to masculine exploits and physical prowess." And even in his 50s, I think he was in a plane crash somewhere in Africa twice. Broken bones, and I think He was lost at sea. He fought so many times. He boxed like in the most crazy way. Actually, there's a quote I want to read you when it comes to Hemingway's boxing. Look at how destructive this and how immature this drivenness of a good man can be. When Hemingway lived in Paris, he went to the same gym as a heavyweight champion, Jack Dempsey, American man who actually moved to Paris for a while. And he was like Mike Tyson at the time. You wouldn't want to spar with him, but some people did, just as a joke. So I found a book. I haven't actually read that book, but it's by a man called Roger Kahn. It's called A Flame of Pure Fire, Jack Dempsey and the Roaring Twenties. So this is what Jack Dempsey, the boxer, said. There were a lot of Americans in Paris, and I sparred with a couple just to be obliging. But there was one fellow that I wouldn't mix it with. That was Ernest Hemingway. He was about 25 or so, and in a good shape. And I was getting so I could read people, or anyway men, pretty well. I had this sense that Hemingway, who really thought he could box, would come out of the corner like a madman. To stop him, I would have to hurt him badly. I didn't want to do that to Hemingway. That's why I never sparred with him. What is this about? You like martial arts, you like boxing, but you can't just spar with a man. You need to beat him. And you couldn't beat Jack Dempsey. Immature, driven. This is not good. That anger, that inner drive that fuels your body does not come wholly from a healed place. And this is why people just point at this man and just laugh. Is this a real man? 50 or 60 years old man and still behaving like a teenager, still wanting to arm wrestle. Speaking of arm wrestling, I've got a friend, very close friend, who was very close to his father to begin with. His father took him out hunting, fishing, outdoor, like he had it all. I looked at him with envy because my father just sat at home when he came back from work. He was so tired. But and his father taught him to drive a car. He took him on his motorbike. He took him how to shoot a gun when he was very like 9 or even younger. But when he was maybe 10, his father left. And this is when actually the warrior spirit is really, really coming up. And you need nurture and direction because he already had that strength from the masculine source. He knew he was a man, but he didn't know if he had what it took to actually defend and protect himself and others. Since his father left, something changed in that boy. Today, he's a school teacher, very academic, very intelligent, very physical, big man, lifting weights and playing football and climbing mountains. He seems like the perfect amalgam, the physical and the spiritual and the intellectual, but there's one thing about him that is worrying. And if you don't know him, you would never know. But I've been with him all my life. He's one of my closest friends. If we sit down one night and have a few drinks, and if he drinks a little bit too much, he would want to arm wrestle with me. He would want to do something physical, as if we're still teenagers. I'm in my 30s. I've got no need to do that. He's got no need. Or hasn't he? This is what people look at and say, wow, machismo, he's a macho man. What has he got to prove? He's got complex. Of course he has. And this is the macho man in a nutshell. At least that's how I see it. These people all lack something from their fathers. They've been given the wrong stuff or not been given enough. However, there is a better way. There's a way to get healed from this stuff. But we need to know where we're going. If we are to be healed, we need to know what we're after. We're after to be a better version of ourselves. Someone who is in charge of inner strength and anger. Not just a weak man. You see, I was listening to a lecture. Someone quoted Friedrich Nietzsche. And Nietzsche said, I've often laughed at the weaklings who thought themselves good because they had no clothes. If you don't know that you're dangerous, if you don't know that you've got deep anger that can destroy, for the lack of a better word, you have no choice but being a good man. What can you do? You can't do anything. But when you know that you've got this, and you've incorporated this within yourself, this will fuel your body with energy. You will be more active, you have more energy, depression will start to disappear. And then you have a choice how to use it. You won't jump out of the dark and surprise you like people with suppressed anger. These men are so rare today. Who's coming now? What's this? Hello. Say hello. Hello. Mila. Yes? Mila. Mila. Daddy need to finish that video, okay? Let's go. Go.